the long game. Well, this should be awesome. Well, yeah, I'm Nic Easley. I'm CEO of 3C Consulting. Just made it back from America, or from South America. This is really important. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a CPA. A lot of those past people, great titles, use these professionals. Without them, you're screwed. Most of the things we've seen in the last 10 years were problems from legal structuring, not understanding the laws, or like horrible tax burdens. We're gonna make a shit ton of money, but then you had horrible accounting in one company and your investors wouldn't come in correctly. So use these professionals and just business guidance here. Originally from Wisconsin, did military. After military, went to Colorado, right time, right place. 2006, right when it was like medical cannabis cards on the wall to, hey, we're doing compliant business. So that's when I came in and have seen this evolution happen. Have worked all over the place in terms of states and countries. A lot of similarities market to market, but some of the things that I see, at least for where this market's going, may be a little different than most people because I've been inside so many of the companies. It's not just reading online articles, or it's meeting with prime ministers, seeing delegational work, going into a company when they've got 250 people and they're not, let's say, making payroll and super inefficient, or didn't plan their business operations, or 4 fungal diseases, 9 pests destroying a huge multi-million-dollar company. That, when you see those parts of the company, that's where you can see what are the common trends, where is this really going, and it's not small-scale little warehouses like Colorado back in the day. Seeing this now, I think international cannabis business, this one has been amazing from a conference, and for years and years, seeing now like what's happened in this last 4 to 5 years since they started. Everyone thinks about Canada or Uruguay for legalizing adult use, like definitely not legal internationally at this point with laws and policies, but with 19 countries having some sort of import, export, or production business, it's really going to be amazing, but it sucks so much right now. Because you have to hold these positions in these countries that don't have massive demand, don't have doctors making prescriptions. It's not the same, the German cannabis market, as the American cannabis market, and thinking legalized medical, where you're thinking prescriptions and doctors, and then Europe having novel foods and how those regulations are gonna affect a cannabis business there compared to we're gonna sell vape cartridges in Austria. Probably not the same basis. So everything international other than Canada, Uruguay, think API, active pharmaceutical ingredient markets, bulk flower. And if it's flower, it's not trimmed fancy like in a bag like this is dank as shit weed. It's usually ground up and unidentifiable. So your whole processes, if you were a Canadian, for example, and then went to grow in Israel or in Denmark, all of a sudden you're growing one sort of specification of a product that's not meant for the whole market, and your whole business plan was wrong. So country by country, how they relate, whose pharmaceutical compacts work together, how the UN and the WHO's recommendations this March could be like step 2 of the step 3 end game for cannabis. But it's happening, but a lot of countries talk about this. There are opportunities everywhere, but if their laws are not correct, you're going to completely fail. Like a Zimbabwe, a Lesotho, a Swaziland, if it's not correct, modeled on these laws, you really have to be very careful in navigating which ones are coming up here, because some are just gonna like waste your time and be painful. Most of these businesses, compliance is unique here in Canada, or here in California and Canada, but each place is different. So if you're thinking of a hands-on company and you're investing in them or operating them, like what rules do you have to follow? How do these rules change? How do you have enough capital to do this? And most people, they get this license, they see huge value, which that's massive opportunities with these limited licenses in states and countries, but they don't realize that that piece of paper is the whole thing that matters. So how do we not lose this piece of paper, not just how do we make a consumer packaged female wellness hemp lifestyle brand, for example. It's that aspect's what's really important to build everything off of. But most people don't know how to cover their ass in this space or think, what is the value in your opportunity? It's the piece of paper. When we think, I put ATF on here, like alcohol, tobacco, firearms, they get to have all the fun stuff. Maybe it goes that way. But when you think of what we're doing and why certain companies have come in on an investment opportunity, it's just barely begun. But now is the bleeding, like when we're almost at $20 billion as an industry annually, and that's just the hands-on opportunities. What's really gonna play out here, and who's gonna control it from a US basis as well as an international basis? So some of these opportunities, we don't grow tobacco in every single state and have, like there's a different tax, like state by state, or why doesn't our good beer out of Colorado make it to all these other markets? It's because there's these different taxes, regulations. So as we're going towards federal side, it's a when. Yeah, think how are you gonna play into that with these opportunities? Not just, I have a cool dispensary in Berkeley, or I have a delivery company in San Luis Obispo, or I have 10,000 acres of flowering canopy or something somewhere. So to beat the odds here, there's tens of thousands of us now as companies, businesses, individuals, and most people don't realize how their little operation is gonna weather this next storm, because you're already seeing it's not as fun as it used to be, but it's way more fun on different levels. This is what changes things for the hands-on companies, be it any sort. If they don't integrate with their communities correctly, they have the biggest problems. From a tax rate standpoint, from being bothered or not choosing the right opportunities. So choose a good place, be involved with that community, and don't be an asshole in that community. Very, very important. Like the good neighbor policies. And in California, with your compassionate carrot, Prop D, Prop M, 215, temp state license process, or any other jurisdiction, if you didn't have that community piece along the way, those are the ones that fail. The people are crazy huge. I've realized this now more than ever over a decade, that each company's operation, or as you're building these teams, or when we look at investment opportunities, where if it's a team in another country or another state that had to bring in expertise, how did they do it? How are they doing well? I see way too many good businesses just fail without good people, and it's not just getting some advisors, but you need your local people and really understand the operation. There's so many outside industries that are applicable to this space, and the people and their skill sets, but you have a very limited window where you can take applicable and make it awesome in this space. Otherwise, they just crush it, because it's not something else, but it's very similar. But yeah, the biggest things that I see important for people is what they bring. Cannabis can be taught, trained, learned, other than the specific little pieces, but we need some rock stars in these companies now. This is kind of I think for all of the companies and countries that I work, the most important thing that happens time and time again is how I think about this. Growing long-term in greenhouses in California for flowers, gonna work for certain places, but the taxes suck here. There's not that much water. Everyone's excited about hemp and cannabis here, but we don't grow all of our watermelons here, or peppers, or tomatoes, or roses. We're pretty lazy when it comes to that standpoint for cost. Or you go to Colombia and the coffee is kind of shitty, and up here you're like, Colombian coffee is really good. Or the apples in Chile a couple weeks ago, they were crappy and little. I always see big Chilean apples. Our market is where products drive to. Same with European markets. So when I think about Peru or Colombia or Uruguay or Mexico at the end of April, what do these things mean? Or maybe a huge thing in Austria could be great, or we're gonna have a giant concrete warehouse growing amazing medical cannabis in Germany or the Netherlands, but how much does that cost? What are those crazy taxes? What are the operational costs? Average wages of the Colombian workers I was just at was $350 US a month. So it's just pay them $5 and they're stoked, and it's amazing for them. Same thing when we thought Macedonia. If you don't think about these costs, how much does it cost to have an employee in California? This state sucks. It's not as bad as France, but it sucks when it comes to employment law. And we have to do the best with these companies, but if you don't think about cost, how to do it consistently with certain quality assurance, quality control, systems and management, your visions and dreams just fail and they pop all over the world. And it's just, $22 million here, $6 million lost there. This is a great thing. You can't just sell your garbage to Canadian public companies anymore. So that whole idea of develop everything and just flip it just doesn't work. And I like this little farm guy. I'm from Wisconsin with milk, and it's you don't want a CBD me right now. What's the price right now of a kilo of high quality CBD distillates or CBG or any other of the hundreds of cannabinoids? It wasn't that good of an idea. It was a short period of time, or think, no offense, a Jan Canna or a great business model. But what happens? So everyone's doing something. Any CBD side company right now on a European basis, you better be ready to understand novel foods. It's happening. So there'll be very, very few bona fide CBD companies in Europe, and they won't produce it there. It's expensive as hell. But where do these inputs now that you're gonna get for 2,000 a kilo, 1,000, 500? What about when the price of a distillate goes to 200 euros, let's say, a high quality kilo? Is your business model gonna survive that? So the distillates and the base products for these are important, but don't just jump on certain bandwagons, or because everyone's going into a market. It can be really dangerous. I've seen that. Get unique with these sorts of products. if you're making products or have a dispensary or manufacturing company, like know the rules of that marketplace and be specific. From seeing Wana and Coda and Kiva and Bang, like every great kind of start of a company, what is it that they did well? How do you either hitch onto something like that or define a space? Or if you're in a new state like Illinois and you get a recreational infuser license or something, how to make like unique products with that instead of we're gonna make vape pens and cartridges and sublinguals and suppositories, and like be specific with your product offerings. It's not just green fields. I like this lavender. There's so many opportunities other than just we're gonna grow dried flower and we're gonna make oils and we're going to, the things that most people are looking at are complete failures now because they didn't understand the commodification of cannabis. And that's where like taxes, agricultural vectors, daytime highs, nighttime lows, cheap land, not 90% clay soil, like perfect climates to do this or to process this under a high standards. And when you think international, that API, like with these brands, they're not thinking correctly about what actually makes a qualified brand market by market. And the best thing you can do if you're a California company or others with this is, how do you have a, let's say, Delaware company, an intellectual property company, license that intellectual property market to market easily and just have different cannabis licenses in the other countries? But how do you do things consistently across the board when we can't franchise, we can't cross interstate lines, I can't. So pull from some of the best ideas that you can on that side. When you think about medical markets or recreational markets, you know, inside the United States, US rec markets are very different and awesome, but expensive from the tax standpoint if you don't do it correctly. And this is where, 10, almost 11 states now, thinking finally Maine coming on board, Massachusetts, Illinois, just indicative of future markets for at least a while. But that state, you think, 12 current producers, 40 more small ones come online, 13 million people, twice the size of Colorado. We're doing about $2+ billion a year, and the Midwest sucks, for example. More people are gonna use cannabis because it's flat and gray. Like, these are huge markets just exploding in our backyard here, where other ones have already happened. Medical is hard. I'm a medical patient from disabled military side, and that market is so critical to do right, establish it for standards, do it for patients, and when you switch to adult use, which is a when, how to like maintain that same like health standards there and really protect medical programs. It's so, anyone that's in the industry that's not giving to like the groups that make new markets for us, AKA like more patients, more profits, more people that need help, like you're an asshole. So if you're in the rec game or the medical game, like fight for more legalization and help and patients' rights. It's what we've hooked on to like pretty much take over the world, and it's the most important thing too. It's almost like for the first time in our industry, in the history of business, if you do the right thing for like people in the markets and like planet, like you're not growing 14-floor hydroponic indoor warehouses in San Francisco high tech, you have 20,000 hectares in Colombia with massive extraction and shipping that for brands created here. What's the impact environmentally? So you make more money in this industry doing the right thing. It's the first time ever. It just costs more money to do it in the beginning, but it's worth it. When we think about what were the biggest problems, this is peaches. I don't know if you know peaches. I figured out how to make that slide myself. Canada, I've had a problem with for 5-6 years, from the LP private side to how public companies happened. So when I Googled Canada sucks for like a picture, I found peaches who didn't like the club scene, but the cannabis scene there, the problem was they were first. And now with like the crash of Canadian public markets, which everyone thought were gonna be so cool for so long, like go public, be billionaires, not the best thing when you're building scalable companies, but they turn the whole world off to cannabis right now in a way, no offense. But with their population, the expectations and true values of companies, it's hurt our investor confidence on private capital or the right capital to grow businesses now. And they're not doing that great. And if you were in that, it was kind of a bummer where you thought speculation, but just lying about future valuations and hurting investor expectations, we're at this point now where if you need even like working capital for a business doing $20 million in revenue a year, it can be challenging. But this is the best time to invest into private companies because they're desperate, they're proven, and they're scalable. And it's kind of that moment of desperation where you can make some like epic wins right now. But also it means really good companies are failing and they're having problems scale, and they didn't plan for these big things. And like I said, you couldn't just sell yourself to one of these big assholes like at 5, 10, 100 times your actual value. So now it's like the truth is really setting in for a lot of companies, and they have to entrench now for the next couple months, like to really get good positive capital coming in again. But don't be like peaches, like don't be like Canada. In the United States, for our big opportunities, it's still market by market by market. And within these markets, there's market evolution and time, and businesses change, and then new laws will happen. There's like a new product offering. But at this point, I found this really fun picture of cannibalism. It's happening. And that's also a very profitable business model where you have how many brands in California, if you're not paying for shelf space, or you're near borders, or if you don't have really good distribution contracts, your awesome Humboldt weed's not making it to the market. Same thing in these other states. Like, distribution is key. And as you're thinking about federal legalization, alcohol, liquor distribution licenses, tobacco type taxes, when we think about investments and placements, it's what is it going to look like in that scheme? But there is so much cannibalism happening now, and it's profitable, and it's like, never thought that'd be good. But in cannabis, as a market establishes, only so many companies are going to be leaders. But for in Canada, this same thing is starting to happen too, which I'll get into a little. But for the next part of the year, these are the most important markets that I see, other than existing and current markets, or figuring out how to recapitalize those assets, let's just say, AKA cannibalism. West Virginia is almost due. We're super engaged and busy, and have been in Illinois, just to establish 75 more dispensaries, 40 more cultivation and extractions. West Virginia, nice, cute little verticals. Not that crazy hard, but really good market to start. Mass has been a mess, but it's gonna get better. Maine's gonna start, but their governor was an asshole, so it's been so long, and not gonna be that great because there's tons of illicit market. It's like the California of the East Coast. In Cali, I'm back. It's a Biggie reference. This is what we're currently working on in California. If you're here, I figured I would go through the current markets that are very important for new business, as well as these ones are about to open. And any new market, like, we study the laws, the policies, the procedures of that place. Is it worth going or not? Are these opportunities valuable or not? And it's not as valuable just to get a license and think you'll get capitalized easily, and someone will just, you still have to run the business. So this is step one for these new companies. Internationally, I know we're getting close here. Watch what happens in Vienna later with the WHO. If their recommendations come out for the UN, like I said, it's step 2 of step 3, and like federal, where every 186 member country of the UN single treaty, if a doctor makes a prescription, they have to provide medicine. If then, awesome. That means that, are they gonna all produce cannabis in their little markets like Finland? Probably not. They're gonna like buy pharmaceutical products from other places, or the bulk oils, or the bulk flour. So it's not like the US, like get a thing to like produce in each place. It's like, where can you do it best at the highest standards and supply that future market demand at the lowest cost and highest quality standards? It's gonna be so enormous. The pharmaceutical, all of this side is so expensive. Preclinical, CRO work, phase 1, 2, 3, what we're seeing though is incredible, but this is the world we play in. Doing US trials, studies, anything in the US, super expensive. Kind of a bummer. Do it other places first, cheaper, and then get the same standards with like PICS countries, for example. What I think really what's big for the future, I don't know if you know this guy, Salvador. He's like the longest known shipwreck survivor of like 469 days. Went fishing with his homie a year and a half later. So like, be a survivor. Also, his homie, he said, died 4 months into it, and he put him in the water. Speaking back to cannibalism there, but Salvador was the fucking man. So if he can do it, you can too if you're having hard times. Like, this market, it's amazing in the new business, but the truth is starting to come out. Like, I haven't even been in America for months, and just working with the companies, seeing what's happening, it's this interesting moment we all figured would happen. We just didn't think it would be this hard, this long, and persistent. But the market is only gonna get better. So you think about how to visionarily prospect in the industry. Are the laws good? Are the climates good? Like, how much capital do you actually need? Understand these business models more than you could realize. Like, one of those past slides, go for San Luis Obispo, or go for this, like, how many people are there? Population demographics, like transportation history, like how hard is it gonna be to get building permits or processes or licenses or permits? Like, this is a real struggle. And if you go into another country, the most important thing, like if Salvador had a map and like a paddle, this is the key. How do their country laws work with the international laws and policies? And then how could other business models work there? And if it's not good, or if it's just cannabis and it's special, it's not gonna be that special, like in the long run there. So I think that was about all I had. I like pandas a lot. So I thought I'd put that up there. Do you guys know that pornography actually saved the panda bear. I read a study, this was like really in the beginning of the month, that they're using animal panda porn like to like get males. Males only like reproduce for 2 days a year. They're really lazy. And I learned about them when I was in Asia a little bit. So during that 2 days, like they have to be like amped up, and the panda population was going way down. This one Chinese doctor's like, how could I get this to happen? So, you know, we've got unique problems. Pandas aren't reproducing, or you can't raise capital, or your business is failing. You know, get creative, you know, to keep the species and keep the plant going alive. Thank you all very, very much. Do you want this? Is it question time? Yes. Sorry about that.
Check, check. One more time for Nic Easley. Also, let's ask him some questions. Does anybody have any questions? All right, I'll start. Do you think it's better to look domestically right now or to look internationally? And should you be looking for to invest in smaller businesses, or should you still try to be in the big multi-million conglomerate dollar game?
Capital comes from. I think that's really important. Where is your money? Because that determines where you're going to be able to do this. Sometimes there's residency requirements. So, you know, I like U.S. things, but I won't take foreign national capital and invest into U.S. companies breaking federal law. I don't think that's a good idea. And I don't like to use certain other capital, so like ancillary businesses or medical cannabis or recreational, like that's, you know, if I was in California, depending on the amount of capital, it's not just getting another indoor grow. But I think that the internationals are harder to get into. They're more expensive and you bleed in the beginning, but they're going to be the huge 100x plus multiples that we really want. US sides are like your solid like 10 to 20s, but some markets you get one of these new licenses in one of these new states, like one of 12 or something. If you can scale that, capitalize it, and it's the right state, I think those are super, super valuable. But if you're international, you need a little bit more money and patience, and yeah, a lot of patience.
Thanks. I got one more over here. I just have to walk over. Always wear comfortable shoes when you go to these things. That's always my advice. I don't know what sort of advice you guys have.
Hey, Nic, your talk a couple of years ago actually made me feel comfortable to enter this industry, so yes. Thanks for that. My question is about your consolidation slide, using those comparable markets as where we might be headed with national legalization. We've talked to a couple regulatory attorneys about that to try to guess where we're headed, and we've heard in general that it's not necessarily correct to look at tobacco and alcohol as a guide for how things will go down, because those were less about state rights, and cannabis has really been pushed from the state perspective.
Correct, yeah.
So we're trying to anticipate, is the differentiation in state regulation going to continue, or are we going to end up with states all headed in the similar direction? And we've sort of landed, well, as long as it's a states' rights thing, then it'll continue to be different state to state.
Yeah.
If you could speak.
I would imagine it's going to be a combination of the two, because we're too lazy to legalize it federally, because we were the assholes that like made it illegal everywhere in the world. It's kind of like, ooh, we're not going to claim that one. Also, we'll protect U.S. businesses when we do this, and so it won't be one of those models. I think it'll be comparative. Eventually, though, quickly, how alcohol like took forever to get legalized, this is happening very, very fast. So the consolidation roll-up strategy, it's more of how it's going to happen, because even if it is state by state forever, which there will be federal, there's still, you know, business and commerce. We're going to try to figure that one out. I would say this, the most important thing is balance your books, get everything ready, like audit ready financials, do shit correctly, so when it comes time for some sort of roll-up where those big companies, they were just too lazy and big and risk adverse to come into it at first. They're gonna figure it out. Like you already saw Constellation and Altria and like all these others soon. If Juul has any money after all the madness, like, you know, all these companies coming in too. It'll happen, I don't know how, but being prepared for it is what I've seen the most important thing. Like how to roll up that business, proper valuations, but do it plan it like a normal, like once you're done with your controller, actually get a CFO, plan those things, so books, everything ready, and then depending how, you know, that acquisition could happen. But you're right, it's different than before, but it's gonna be fast. And as the federal legalization happens and international at the same time, we'll have to come onto it on a medical side. But the rec side, Yeah, that's a good question, but it'll happen one way or another. Just be ready.
Hey, what's up, Nick?
Good afternoon.
My name is Daniel with the San Jose Cannabis Equity Working Group, and my question for you is, are you comfortable sharing with us your biggest win and your biggest fail of 2019?
2018 or 19?
19.
19. It is 2020. Biggest of 19, I had a nepotism issue, which sometimes you're like, nepotism's good, like family members, not my family, very small family, and they're just like, oh, Nick's in the weed. But like, this is like, some partners of mine were family, and they'd been together for a long time, had a bunch of kids. It was like very small cap table, epic project. They get a fucking divorce, or she wants to leave him because he's a horrible husband. I've been working with him for a year, and I'm like, oh shit, this shit just blew up. And that's happened, I've seen in one way or another. So to use that example and not the specific kind of country business project, but you got to really know like your people and trust. And if you're building this, like I said, bringing in new people, bringing in new trust is huge. So failures in people is probably like the biggest, I'd say, deficit of 19, which I'm fixing, but that one's gonna be beautiful too, cannibalistic. I'm gonna fix that one, take that shit over now. It's fucking awesome. It's painful. So it's kind of like both in the same, and best win of 19, as an individual, I kind of came up with a dole model with a few groups on some international genetics and processes to where some can produce the bananas and some make the dried bananas kind of thing. So those sorts of business models long-term, like genetics impact is really, really critical. Probably a win that not realized as big as I would like it now, but the long terms on that are just huge. And also, hitting 20 billion last year, 20% of our country is legal for adult use purchases. That's kind of a big deal. And now the medical rights, where we have 3 more states to at least get basic medical. So biggest win there, I think that we're still around, and also that Canada finally got exposed for the lying shit that they were back in April, May. That was probably the biggest win for the industry too.
I want to ask, when you talk about genetics being the next wave or whatnot, is that in terms of patenting them? Are people going to run into problems trying to have proprietary? Is it all going to remain? It's kind of been somewhat open source for a while. For the most part, there's always a few proprietary outliers, but what do you think?
How many types of potatoes are there in Peru is kind of like my question to that. Or
Right, but I mean, how many types of potatoes will Monsanto let you grow?
Well, not a good example currently. That glyphosate thing, not that good of an idea, at least on their breeding side. The US is very different than other countries. Think about Driscoll's, breeders' rights. It's not about sometimes owning the genetic, it's like having certain varieties and having licensing agreements with offtake agreements for said strawberry. So like, here, I'm gonna give you these strawberries for 8%, you can pay me, and then I get first right of refusal back on all your strawberries. I'll put them in my little boxes, but you're like dirty and having to fight pests and put up yellow sticky traps and like greenhouses to grow my strawberries or raspberries. That's on an international side, breeders' rights. In the United States, it's challenging because we think my OG Kush or my cookies or my animal cookies crossed with this Blue Dream awesome like chemovar strain variety, they're awesome. But when you get deep down into it, it's the API, the active pharmaceutical ingredients that are important. And even if my variety is not as good as yours, by the time you extract it and put it into a product, other than certain concentrates, it doesn't matter. It's like certain that's where you get into like this thing called chemistry. So it's hard as hell. People don't go around being like, I'm a dank corn farmer. And I love that side, and like that's where it all came from. But the sad thing is, a lot of people are gonna get just screwed long term when it comes to growing certain varieties that they had licensing agreement with. But in the US, varieties spread so quickly, it's so hard just to keep a little cutting or tissue culture. So I think for most individuals, they won't have problems for using it. It's just for the big things where they're pulling out specific things that those protections are really valuable. Yeah, the asshole's already protected that already, but the plant's everywhere now, so it's all right.
More questions? That's it? You're as educated as you want to be on this particular subject?
It's a big landscape out there. I've seen a lot, but no matter what you're doing in the space, it matters. This is once in a lifetime we can create an industry that matters, that people care about, and it can be impactful and super profitable. But it's not just these buzzwords anymore that you can follow behind and think you're gonna have a CBD company and take over the world. Like, that was really fun. But like the more unique ones we keep seeing, like it's barely begun, and it's gonna be huge. It's just most of the people, it's like the curve of dissolution right now. Like same thing with the stock market. Tech was cool, tech got really cool, but no one actually did shit. All the things crashed, who did survive? Like we're on that downward, but On a curve, though, it's getting larger, like the volume demand. So it's this moment where if you can figure out what's going to survive and what's going to be real, it's not some new IP tracking software for plants. Like there's this thing called ag, it has that already. So, or it's not like some blockchain where you're going to do seed to sale. Like this shit exists in all these other markets. So they're just going to buy the winners, scale into that, and use, when you have a problem, outside industry solutions and cater them for this. You don't have to buy a $30,000 bucking machine. You can cut some, steel, like food grade, and like shuck through it, depending. But yeah, there's a lot of opportunities. Just stay diligent and know the rules. I think that's the most important thing I could leave you with, the compliance side. Otherwise, your businesses will fail and never happen. So really appreciate the opportunity to share fresh back from Colombia.
One more time,
Thank you.
Nic Easley. Muchas gracias por su tiempo, señor.
Yeah.
Right? Yo hablo español.